Welcome, everyone. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes. We want to give everyone a chance to join the webinar. I'll be with you shortly. Okay, it looks like the stream of people joining has turned to a trickle. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here. Welcome, everyone. This is I think the third in a series of Q&A sessions we've done with faculty and staff and students. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jeff McClurkin, professor as well as President Payno's chief of staff, and I'll be moderating today's Q&A. I'm going to talk through some logistics first before Nina, Beth, and Juliette each give some brief remarks, and then we get into the Q&A. Some of you have submitted questions already. Thank you for that. Others have not. Regardless, I would ask that you please go ahead and click on the Q&A tab. And submit a question there. Just say that the chat should generally be reserved for procedural questions or technical questions to Mark Simpkins, who's helping me, helping us on the backside of run this, or to me. We'll use the Q&A tab to pull together the common questions, and you'll have a chance to put them to our three panelists today. I would ask that you identify who you'd like to answer that question, your particular question. Do note that on Zoom, we have it set up so that you can ask your question anonymously by clicking in the text box and checking the appropriate box. And if it's an anonymous question, I'll read it. If it's a question that you're owning, then we'll arrange to unmute you so that you can ask the panelists that question directly. Do note in the Q&A tab, if you see a question there that you are particularly interested in hearing more about, please use the familiar like thumb. The more people who upvote a question, the higher that question will go in the queue. We also have people watching on YouTube, and Maureen from Events AV will bring questions from there into the Q&A in the webinar as well. So I do want to thank Maureen, Mark Simpkins, and many other people in Events AV and the help desk and university relations who have made this particular event possible. Before I turn things over to Nina, who will speak first, I did want to make a couple of points to frame our discussion today. The first is just to say thank you. Thank you for all that you all have done, all the work to manage all of the chaos of this crisis, to get our students to the end of the semester and the year, and the grades are in. So that's huge. As President Payno has said multiple times, it is amazing how so many people have worked together, have sacrificed, have helped each other and our students so far. So I just wanted to start by saying thank you for all that you've done. Now, I know that many people have questions and would like answers about the budget, about plans for the fall, about provisions for the safety of the UMW community. Our panelists are going to try to answer the questions that they can, in particular in their areas of oversight. But again, I would just ask that you be aware that there are many questions we don't yet have answers to because there are still so many moving pieces. Just as a reminder, we're waiting on the state budget decisions in June. And probably again in a special session in August and September. We're waiting to see what our enrollment for the fall will be. We're waiting to see what the state and federal government health orders will be. We're waiting to see what this disease itself will do over the summer and into the fall. We're waiting on the medical community to come up with new and better methods of testing and treatment and prevention. And we're waiting on Chev and a state public health university committee to come up with some collective suggestions for reopening schools. The reality, of course, is that we can't wait, though. We can't wait to start planning for those issues, and we're thinking about them and how they affect the university moving forward. As President Payno mentioned last week, we want to bring students back to campus in the fall to resume our face-to-face learning experience where and how that is possible. But we know that we need to be able to do that in a way that recognizes and respects the safety and security of our staff and our faculty and our students. So President Payno created the task force to raise and begin to answer these questions about what resuming face-to-face education in the fall might look like. And I just wanted to give you an update on where that is right now. As we've gotten beyond the initial discussion of the overarching issues, President Payno has added to the task force to include representatives from UFC and SAC, as well as a number of other units and areas of expertise as we've begun to identify key questions that need to be answered. And we've split into 6 subgroups. One, public health, chaired by Mike Muckenhop, it's also known as Safety Mike, and myself. And just to give you an example of what some of these subgroups are talking about, the public health group is looking at questions of testing and contact tracing and social distancing guidelines and isolation guidelines. And what do we do about personal protective equipment or PPEs? What do we do about masks? What kind of policies or provisions might we be able to make? What are our hygienic practices for the fall? Travel limitations, a wide array of policies. Nina is in charge of the academics subgroup. Juliette's in charge of dining and student life subgroup. Dave Fleming is in charge of residence life. Beth and Christy Pack are in charge of work life. And Jerry Slazak is chairing technology. So, and there are a number of people who have been brought in to work with each of those groups. The current status of these subgroups is that we're still at the point where we're raising questions about all of the areas that we would need to address to be ready for the fall. And in order to do that, Tim O'Donnell in particular took the lead on creating what we're calling a readiness matrix for each subgroup built off of guidelines from the CDC, from OSHA, from the state, from the federal government, as well as what a number of other schools and organizations are doing in consultation with legal advice. We're starting to brainstorm scenarios for reopening, and we're trying to identify the needed resources to improve our readiness in all of these areas. But this is all really preliminary. Again, the goal is how best to move forward on fulfilling our educational mission while addressing the safety needs of staff, faculty, and students. But I know that you all continue to have questions, and we'll try to answer the ones that we can, but we're also committed to continuing communication going forward. University Relations will be announcing a number of additional interactive sessions through May and into June with President Payno and other administrators, including the UFC meeting next week, a Q&A session with Kimberly Buster Williams and admissions on questions of enrollment, as well as meetings for the president with incoming and current students. We also plan on launching a weekly email about what the task force has been working on that week. So each week we'll update you with what the task force has been working on. And we pledge to tell you about what we can when we can. With that, I've gone on too long, but I wanted to give you that update. I'll turn things over to Nina to give a few remarks, then Beth, then Juliette, then we'll turn to the Q&A. In the meantime, get your questions into the Q&A tab and vote up the questions you want to see addressed. Thank you. Nina?
Thank you, Jeff. Good afternoon, everyone. And just to echo Jeff's comments, again, to all the faculty and staff, I know sometimes it didn't feel like that, but you all have done an absolutely incredible job. And we have the data to prove that. We have started to get the feedback from students, and they truly recognize your contributions, but more importantly, they recognize your dedication. So you really have done a really magnificent job. We have a number of things coming up that I want to remind you of. The first is we do have a UFC meeting on May 13th. And I know a number of you have posed earlier questions and also are I think putting up questions now about getting your courses approved for the fall if you want to do them completely remote, if you want them to be approved as online courses, and what the timetable for that would be. You will be getting more information about that, but there will be a process for doing a number of faculty governance matters over the summer if we need to. And Anand can provide more information about that later. Also, we will be having a meeting for all the faculty, an open forum for all the faculty on May 14th. That's the Thursday after the UFC meeting. And that open forum is going to be an opportunity for all of the faculty to hear some of the feedback from the student survey. Remember that when we switched to this alternative course evaluation process, we made a commitment when we got the data back to share it with all the faculty and to have an opportunity to discuss what we've learned. So our goal on Thursday the 14th, and you should be getting information about that shortly, will be to have an open forum for faculty, and Deborah Schlief will give you all a brief overview and give you some of her thoughts. We will also have Jerry Slazak and Victoria Russell there because they have also been in discussions around that data and are putting together a pretty comprehensive faculty development program for faculty that will run from essentially early June into August for faculty who want to participate and faculty who want to engage in some of that faculty development as they can. So look for an announcement about Thursday's meeting, and you'll have opportunities to ask a lot of questions about it, etc. Thank you all for getting in your grades. Another data point that I'm going to be looking at is what were the outcomes and consequences of our changes in grade policies. And there's already been some interesting developments along that line. So a lot of feedback on Thursday. And finally, yes, we are in the process of looking at our budgets. And I do want to make clear that when we get to the point where we can make final decisions, and as Jeff said, we are not anywhere near that right now, but we've made some preliminary ones, obviously, but we still have a long way to go. But that process will be what it has always been, which is the deans will be in those discussions and the department chairs will be able to give feedback, et cetera. So everyone will have an opportunity to at least opine about that. Lastly, with regard to the task force, the subcommittee, the fall planning task force academic subcommittee, which Jeff indicated is chaired by me. I just want to remind you who's on that. It is both what we call the AAC working group. So that's Tim O'Donnell, Deb Schlief, John Morello, the three deans, Keith, Lynn, and Pete, Kimberly Young for continuing and professional studies. Jeff frequently joins us, and added to that group now are Anand Rao and Andrew Dolby. And we actually had our first official meeting yesterday morning, and that was a meeting where we were joined by Jerry Slazak and Victoria Russell to discuss planning on faculty development. So that group has already started meeting, and I'm happy to answer any questions about any of this later on. And that's it, Jeff.
Great. Thank you, Dina. Beth, can you go next?
Sure. Again, echoing Nina and Jeff, it's been so impressive and inspiring to be part of our workforce as we have all adapted and had to pivot is a new action word that we're using a lot, over the last couple of months. And it just, as we will continue to need that adaptability and flexibility, it's just been very heartening to see how everybody's come together and really worked to navigate through these challenges together. With regard to, I'll take the opportunity to make a couple of HR announcements. Just a reminder about open enrollment, benefits open enrollment for health benefits and FSAs is happening right now. You would have received a packet in the mail to your home, and as well as an email, and enrollment is available online or via form that was emailed out to everybody's home. So Please make sure if you are not making any changes, this has been a common question that we're getting. If you're not making any changes to your health plan or to your dependents, there is no action required. You don't need to do anything. The only exception to that is if you have an FSA, flexible spending account, you have to enroll in those each year. So to make sure that that you stay in that. So hopefully that is helpful, and please make sure if you do want to make changes that you review the materials in your packet and get online to do that. Also, just a reminder that Monday, May 11th, is a day off as Employee Appreciation Day. I got a lot of responses to that email as well. So I knew that was a big question, and it's a great opportunity to still show how much we do appreciate our workforce and everybody who's been working, even though there wasn't unfortunately, it wasn't a graduation ceremony to plan and plan for and clean up after. Everybody has still been working so hard in so many other ways. So glad to have that day off. I know I will enjoy it. And then an announcement went out regarding the SAC, the new time for SAC chats. Christy Pack who leads the SAC currently, has been having frequent weekly chats that are open to faculty and staff. Those have been moved to Thursdays at 11 a.m. And there was a link in the email that went out. Anna Billingsley sent it out an hour or two ago, a link in the email to join that chat. So just to encourage you to do that. Hopefully we'll be able to answer as many questions, like Jeff said, as we can today, to the extent possible. We've probably got a lot more still questions than we do answers, but this is a good opportunity to help you know what's being worked on and what's being discussed, and for you to be able to ask any remaining lingering things that if you don't hear the information in what's talked about already, that we can at least address it to the extent possible. So appreciate the opportunity to engage with you this way. And that's it for me for right now.
Thanks, Beth. Juliette?
All right, thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. Well, first of all, let me say I miss everyone. I miss my colleagues, and of course, I miss our students. I, for one, have learned through this that I'm not really designed to do my job from a living room. And yet I also acknowledge that over these last 2 months, many of our staff have had no choice but to do their jobs on campus. And I want to say that we see you and we thank you. So much of our work is about supporting the academic mission, getting our students to graduation so they can get their degrees and have better lives and contribute to their communities. And it's incredibly meaningful work. And even as these last few weeks have been strained us enormously, have been very stressful, they have also revealed so many of our strengths, including supporting and celebrating our students. Parents, who are often or even usually our biggest cynics and critics, have sent me dozens of messages praising our faculty and staff. And I think that's important for you all to hear. One letter told me of how her daughter was moved to tears by a really kind note from a mentor. Another wrote about her graduating student. If someone were to ask what Mary Washington means to me as a parent, I would have to say that UMW is a place where my son not only gained a valuable education, but a place where he grew into adulthood. So that's pretty significant. Now, as you heard, and I think this is true, that the academic mission is our most important mission. But of course, during an emergency, during a pandemic, the mission to support health and safety becomes more salient. And yet, what we have seen over the last few weeks is that these two missions, our academic mission and our mission to ensure the safety of our community, are not separate. And in fact, they are really inextricable in a lot of ways. If you're like me, you are craving right now specific guideposts on where we will be in the fall. And like residential liberal arts colleges and universities around the nation, Mary Washington hopes and intends to resume academic operations on campus this fall. And this is what the Mary Washington experience is all about. And we know our students want to be here. And yet, as Jeff said at the start, the major guideposts are not yet clear, right? You know, we don't know what the state and federal guidelines about allowing students back on campus will be, what will be required in terms of equipment and sanitary measures, what will our institutional budget be, what will our enrollment look like. But I will reiterate that even as these major guideposts are under construction, faculty and staff are doing some really purposeful planning. Some examples among many, Residence Life and Housing is exploring what residence halls could be prepared as possible quarantine spaces. UMW Dining is preparing for more grab and go options and considering beefing up delivery on campus. Athletics is closely watching and working with the NCAA to see where fall sports and travel will land. And all of these planners are asking, how are we supporting our students who have been disproportionately affected by this pandemic in their financial and familial realities? And so what I'm trying to say, my point is that even after these major guideposts have not appeared, they haven't appeared yet, we have people really planning hard in their areas so that when the guidance is clear or more clear, these area-specific plans will kick into place into one large university plan that will allow us ideally to support the full Mary Washington experience for our students. It is the students, after all, who bring such meaning to our work. So thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thanks, Juliette. So I'm going to turn right to the questions so we can get through as many as we can. Thank you for continuing to add them. The one that has received the most upvotes goes to Nina, and it's from Steve Harris, and it's your first question, not your second question, Steve. So we'll see if that one gets enough votes. But Mark, if you could unmute Stephen Harris.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Yes.
Okay, great. Nina, I mean, like you basically more or less addressed like the question, and you know that this will be taken to the UFC. And I guess I don't know if you had anything to add about like my second point in the question there, which is that, you know, if for instance you registered your courses like hybrid, but things suddenly are, the closer we get to late August, I know that's wishful thinking, but you know, would we be able to reverse sort of how a course is actually advertised in this sense? And then one question came to mind when you were talking about this, Nina, is I mean, I have my own thinking about which of my courses I might want to do this to. From your perspective, especially, you know, for the brass tacks issue of getting students to actually come to our university, do you guys have any sense about what kinds of courses you would like to see as being hybrid versus remote versus normal? Or is that just too early to kind of figure out, you know, how answering that question might impact enrollment?
Those are all really good questions, Stephen. I just want to start with, I really like your Soviet realism art there.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's one of my favorite.
Yeah. Anyway, yes. So the process, the goal is to develop a process that we can do this summer that would enable faculty to get approvals to teach their courses 100% online, to teach them with hybrid qualities, etc. And as I said, yeah, Anand and the UFC are going to work that out. So I'm confident that we're going to have a process. Change is also, yeah, I think it makes perfect sense, and for us to be prepared for anything. So that means that, you know, you get your approvals lined up, and we start in class, and we're there together. We may be social distancing, but then we have to do something different. Or if in July the you know, conditions on the ground change. So I would assume, and I would certainly recommend, that we have, yes, change built in. And if we have a completely different reality that we need to respond to, I'm confident the UFC and distance and blended learning and other groups are going to enable that kind of flexibility. And I do recommend it in terms of those approvals. So you have a sort of bank of options that you
Okay.
can pull out when you need them. The last one on which courses would be better hybrid and this, that, and the other. Boy, I recommend that you sit down and talk with both your colleagues in your discipline, but also Victoria and the Teaching Center and other folks, other faculty who've taught in a variety of those modalities. Because it is, to me, it is as much, it's a function of the nature of the course and who the students are and what your learning outcomes are, et cetera, that really drives pedagogy. But I think that's a really good question. And I think getting together with other faculty and getting feedback from your colleagues who have a lot of experience is going to be very helpful to you. And I don't want to give you that advice. I want you to get that advice from your colleague, your faculty colleagues, Victoria and others.
Okay. Thanks.
So the next question is an anonymous one, so I'll read it for Beth. If there will be classified staff furloughs, how would that process work? And is there a UMW or DHRM policy that employees can review?
Sure. Well, first of all, I will say that there are a lot of things being looked at. Cost containment and cost reduction options are being looked at with a large goal of preserving jobs and making and hopefully not getting to the point where we have to do those layoffs and furloughs. However, I appreciate the question, and there are definite processes in place by the state, and those policies are out on the DHRM website. I don't know I can't tell you exactly how to navigate to there, but it's dhrm.virginia.gov. But if you just Google DHRM, you can find it, and those policies are out there, and they're pretty prescriptive. Now, there's also temporary layoff policies as well. What I will say about that, though, is that in the context of this pandemic, some DHRM policies have shifted and changed, and there have been exceptions made coming from the state. So there's always the possibility that what is out there now could be modified temporarily or permanently based on the situation. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, the unmuting problem. Thank you, Beth. So the next question is from Stephen Harris again. It did make its way up to the top. So 2 questions to the top already. Well done, Stephen. And it is, and Mark, if we can let him ask it.
So yeah, basically the question is, if cuts in salary will be made, about sort of when will that be announced? And then also what would be sort of the ballpark range in reductions? And I know this is like a really sensitive question, obviously, for everybody, just like the previous one. And I guess I would also frame it in the sense that like a lot of faculty, I've been very grateful about the transparency of a lot of the messages that we've been getting from the president and the staff about all these kinds of issues. I am trying to sort of read in between the lines sometimes in those emails, just to try to figure out. I mean, I know right now, there's not like a definite answer to this question, but if there's any sort of sense about when that decision would be made, and maybe any kind of ballpark range about what the percentage cut would be, just so that I could start and others could start planning, I guess.
So I'm going to go ahead and just take a stab at that, and I just have to, Steve, I just have to refer you to where I began. I understand people want to know the answer to this question, want to be able to plan, of course, but the reality is there are so many variables still out there about what our budget is going to look like. That's why in Troy's message about the budget, there's a pretty wide range there in terms of the impact of our budget. And so we can't even begin to announce what kinds of what the ballpark range in reductions would be. Again, I just point back to the mileposts. We will have to put together a budget in June based on our best guess about where things are at that point, but there will still be a number of outstanding issues. In fact, almost all of the issues that I mentioned at the beginning are still going to be out there. What will our entering class look like? How many of our students are returning? Will we be able to bring students back for the entire semester and thus get the revenue from housing and from dining and from auxiliary fees? We don't know any of the answers to any of those questions at this point. And so we'll have a budget plan in June, but that's a budget that we may then have to revisit if in August and September the state comes back and says, we're reducing the state appropriation for the University of Mary Washington. So all I can say is as soon as we have more information, as soon as we have some certainty about this, we will communicate those things to everyone.
Okay.
Okay, so the next question is for Nina, and it's anonymous. Who is representing the library on the academic task force, and when will they be brought in?
Well, there are a lot of academic units that are not on the task force. The task force is really consists of certain constituencies that are then expected to work with all the other constituencies. So right now, there's no plan to put a particular individual from the library on the fall task force. However, the library is certainly part of our planning for fall. I've had discussions with Rosemary Arneson about that. In fact, she's, I know, working with the library staff. She's working with Jerry Slazak and Victoria Russell on faculty development planning. So I don't know that the library is not fully included, if you like, in fall planning, but I'm happy to have more conversations with Rosemary if there's not good communication or they don't feel that they're being tapped enough and getting enough input on this process. I'm happy to work with Rosemary to increase that. But right now, as they have been tapped, the library has certainly been involved in recognizing that they need to plan for a variety of contingencies in the fall.
Okay. Next question is, what do the current enrollment numbers look like for the next incoming class, and how do they compare to last year at this time? I do want to stress that we are going to have Kimberly Buster Williams do one of these with Melissa and the admissions team. I will say that this is an unusual year. The normal May 1st deadline is not quite as strict and absolute as it has been in the past. Our numbers are lower than they were last year. And we're still trying to figure out quite what that means. And that's about as far as I'm willing to go down, talking outside of my area of expertise. I would just ask that, again, we know that this is something people are interested in, and we'll, I believe we have KBW scheduled for 2 weeks from today to have that question. And I think she and her team will have a better sense of things then, and they'll be able to talk through some of those issues. Next, we've got another question for Nina, and it's from Jason Davidson. So if we can unmute Jason. Go ahead, Jason.
Okay, so it's about this question that we heard from the chairs meeting about there not being the $500 or supplemental funds for travel, and specifically how that relates to tenured track faculty's need to engage in a, quote, pattern of scholarly activity as the handbook suggests. And having served on the committee, I know that lots of faculty attend conferences or other people in the arts, other things as part of their professional activity. So it's really twofold. One is I would sort of suggest that it would be nice to maybe assuage the concern of those tenure track faculty and or give them your advice on what they should do, but also how both the departments and the tenure and promotion committee should deal with the situation.
Thank you, Jason. Yes, both very good questions, and obviously I've certainly been thinking about it a lot, and have had discussions with the deans about this. So first, I think there are two things embedded in your first question, because the faculty 500, yes, if I had to make a prediction right now, I'm going to predict that that is definitely something that, at least for the next year, we have to give serious consideration to cutting. We just do, given our current circumstances. It's not a final decision yet, but I think I don't see how we can do it right now. That could change, but I don't. So that may go away for next year, at least for next year. On top of that, we will undoubtedly be having travel restrictions, and we may even have to impose, from a budgetary standpoint, restrictions on travel and meals and a variety of other things. And this is across the university, not just on the faculty side. So yes, I think we can anticipate we've already had a disruption in the ability of our probationary faculty to do what they would normally do this semester, which is one reason why I went ahead and made the decision to extend all of their tenure clocks by a year. But I think we're now heading into another period where the ability of faculty, probationary, and those who are, who want to continue their scholarship and activity, which everybody does, you're all going to be restricted. You're just not going to have the resources and the mobility potentially to do that. So my recommendation, and this came up in a UFC meeting a couple of weeks ago, my recommendation is, first and foremost, that at each academic department and the two colleges, COB and COE, the faculty really have a serious discussion about what they think should be the expectation for faculty next year, and how they want to respond to the potential limitations on scholarly and professional activity. I think that discussion really has to start at the department level with the senior faculty. And I'd like to see a recommendation on how this, how we could address this, come from the department chairs, the college faculty, and the P&T committees. And let's remember, we have 3 P&T committees. So I think all of those constituencies have to consider this. I really do. This is not a decision that I would simply make. This is something I need feedback and some suggestions and recommendations from the faculty.
You said department chairs, P&T committees, and?
Well, I think it should be.
I missed the third.
Remember, we have 3 colleges and
right, the different committees, right? But you mentioned a third constituency, and I was busy writing.
P&T, we have 3 P&T committees.
Right. No, I understand. I thought you said department chairs, somebody else, and then the
associate deans. We could
associate deans. Okay.
Yeah, and we could throw in, Jason, and really it's in their charge. We could really throw this all into the University Faculty Affairs Committee, and they could get input from all those constituencies, and they could make a recommendation. So you've really got a number of ways to go, but this has to start with the faculty. This really has to start with the P&T committees. This has to start with a discussion in the faculty making recommendations. But I think just one more thing, we already made the decision to extend the tenure clocks for those probationary folks for very good reasons. And I think similarly, it is important. It would be unrealistic to hold somebody to the same standards and expectations for scholarly and professional development when they are receiving some funding and they have mobility, as opposed to a year when they would not be getting additional funding and they may be extremely limited in their mobility. So I certainly think there needs to be an appropriate response. But what that is, I want to hear your thoughts.
Thank you.
Okay, Nina, if you could just follow up. Jen Walker was asking a related question about instituting a limitation on faculty travel as we move into the fall semester. So this is outside of funding, but travel in general.
It's a tricky one, because we've been hesitant to approve any kind of travel, primarily from the standpoint of a budget constraint. just anticipating that's going to be an area where we may have to do some reductions. So I would also be very concerned about whether or not the extent to which there is going to be travel just in general in terms of the response to the pandemic. But I would say from a budgetary standpoint, I'm very hesitant to approve any travel. Did that answer her question?
Yeah, let's go ahead and give her a chance to follow up.
Hi, Nina.
Hey.
I was just asking more broadly. I know some other universities have already instituted either request or more beyond request that faculty don't travel at all, even beyond the budget. And I was just wondering if any of those discussions had started.
Well, no, not because that sounds to me now like a health safety question.
Yes.
And again, I don't think I never want to be the one who answers a health safety question. I'm not that kind of doctor. But what I would say is that I would be hesitant to spend my own money to plan to travel, because I think there might very well be health restrictions. I don't know that the university is anywhere close to advising faculty and staff on that. But what I can tell you is, on a budgetary standpoint, I'm not approving anything.
Yeah, I would just add on to that the state had forbid travel earlier, and I would just sort of echo what Nina said. I can't imagine that we would go beyond the state piece. The funding piece, sure, that makes sense. But does that answer your question, Jen?
Yes, thank you.
Jessica has asked about representation. I can go ahead and answer that. Sabrina Johnson is on the task force itself, and she is addressing with great regularity questions of inclusive excellence and equity and access. All right. Beth, can you take on this next one? It's anonymous. Has the university or state considered incentives for those who are eligible to retire?
Well, it's a lot of options are being looked at. The thing about incentives for programs like that is that there's really not a lot of immediate savings to be had, and the savings from incentivized retirement typically aren't realized for 2 to 3 years. So that would down the road. So that would not be a top of the list item to be reviewed.
Okay, thank you. This one is from YouTube, from Shrupa, and Nina, I think you'll need to take it. Given the court cases we're seeing around the country, how do we prepare to go remote if necessary in the fall? And then how do we handle individual faculty concerns about face-to-face meetings in the fall?
Sorry, technical difficulties resolved. I.e., I had to unmute myself. Let me answer the second one first. That's really that really falls under the broader category, Sharup, of how we're going to handle the concerns of all of our employees, because we're going to have faculty who may have those concerns. We may have staff. So I think all I can tell you is we would handle all of that on a case-by-case basis. And it is certainly the case that if we have an employee that has health issues that would mean they should not be in, say, face-to-face contact with their students, I would assume, if it's feasible, that they would be able to teach remotely. And I think that we have to assume that that may actually happen just in the middle of the semester. Suppose a faculty member, for some reason, maybe they have to be at home because they have an immunocompromised faculty, family member or something. So I think we need to be prepared, yes, for faculty to need to go remote periodically or perhaps for the semester. It's really a health and safety issue, and I said that is going to be a priority. Conversely, by the way, I think all our faculty need to be prepared for a student. We may be in class teaching, but now you have a student who needs to be remote for a certain period of time, and We have to be able to make that adjustment for and support that individual student. If I understand what you're, Shrup, it's not clear to me which of the many lawsuits that are blooming right now, which ones you're referring to. So I'll take a stab at two. One is the whole issue of what happens if we have to go remote. And our students have, as Juliette was referring to earlier, started with the presumption that they were going to be at a high quality residential public liberal arts university. Even as a commuter student, they still have what we think of as a residential experience. So there is litigation, there's class action, as you know, litigation out there from individuals trying to get tuition refunds on the grounds that the institution went remote. We'll have to see how those play out. I think they are certainly out there, but right now, I would suggest that everybody needs to plan for an opening in the fall, traditional opening with a lot of remote and hybrid things built into your courses. If we have to go remote, we will cross that bridge, and we need to be prepared for that as well.
Okay, I'm cognizant that we're running short on time. We've still got a bunch of questions. I'm going to throw this next question to Beth, but then I'm going to try to answer a few of these that I think can be answered pretty briefly, and then move on. But Beth, the question is: do furloughed employees keep their health benefits?
Yes. Yes, and yes, that's the simple answer.
Okay, that was good. Good. That's if you, yeah, we can get through a lot of questions if they all, yes, if we keep them that simple. The next question is: how has the university decided to utilize the 1.4 million from the CARES Act not designated for students? And that answer is pretty simple too. We will use it to try to backfill a portion of the $4 million refund that we had to give to students for housing, for dining, and for parking. So that's where that's going. Janine has a question about adding a column to the course schedule. Nina, go ahead, Janine.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's simple. It's just written there, but it's just sort of, I think it would be useful if there were some way to indicate in advance courses that will be synchronous versus asynchronous in the fall, assuming whether they are online already or in case they shift suddenly to online, because I think that will affect which courses students decide to take.
Yes, I've actually had a conversation about that, several actually. So I have no answer for you, Janine, but one is coming. It is actually being looked at right now, how to do that and the best way to do that. So stay tuned.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
The next question is about Mind Power, and are there any updates on Mind Power and the branding campaign? Is that still happening? It is still happening, and again, I don't want to get too far out of my own wheelhouse or ask Juliette, Nina, or Beth to talk about stuff from university relations, but it is moving forward. There will be information coming out over the next, well, I don't want to, I actually don't want to speak for Lisa and her unit. It is moving forward. There are plans to move forward. Part of the difficulty is figuring out how you roll out a branding campaign in the midst of an election and a COVID crisis. So, but it is still happening. Rosemary, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. I was asking, it's something I've been talking about with the library staff a lot. For public spaces like the library, are we going to be provided with protective equipment, guidelines for interacting with the public as we open up?
Yeah, so
that's a Beth answer.
Yeah. Go ahead, Beth.
But that's, yeah, that is something that the task force, the president's task force, is absolutely looking at. There's the whole public health section of that task force, and there's lots of discussion happening around PPE and the protocols for visitors and public spaces. And
I would certainly like to have, I would like to have a voice in that conversation if at all possible.
Yeah, Rosemary, I understand. There's a whole bunch of, part of what we're dealing with is trying to figure out what kind of guidance and or regulation we're going to get from the state, which will affect a lot of that. I will tell you that we are looking at how we can order personal protective equipment, masks, cleaning supplies. I mean, I think all of that is part of it, and I think there will be opportunities to provide additional input along the way. But yeah, I think you can reach out to me and to Mike and Hopt as we take a look at that public health discussion, and that is, it's absolutely very high up on our list in trying to figure out how we do this in a way that is safe and fair to our to everyone. So
and Rosemary, your concern, just remember that this is registrar's office, student accounts, academic advising, the museums, it's everywhere. So it really is something that is being looked at.
So Marie McAllister has a question. It says for Nina, but I know that Nina is going to throw it to me. So Marie, do you want to go ahead and ask it?
Just, can we use federal funds to ensure that our scholarship and rural students have internet access this fall, since they didn't all this spring?
Yep. And this is, we've got a couple of surveys out there. We're surveying both our incoming students and using the part of the course evaluation piece. Deborah Schlief is pulling that information together. We'll do a follow-up with our students to get a sense of how widespread the issue is. There certainly were problems, but Deborah Schlief's initial analysis suggests that that less than 2% of our students had serious issues along this way. Now that a couple 150, 200 students, so we got to figure out how to deal with that. We are planning to use some of the federal funds to address a MiFi and a laptop situation, for those students. We haven't quite figured out how exactly that distribution will happen. There are some complications about the way that the CARES Act requires that money to be distributed. But we're also looking at ways of using development funds. You may have seen that our advancement office put out a call for donations to help our students, and technology is one of those areas. It's absolutely a priority that we have to figure out how to address this issue. First of all, to identify those students who are in need, and then figure out how to get a workable technology to them.
And Jeff, don't you think that on that Thursday we can give a preliminary overview to the faculty on that technology survey, both on the faculty side and on the student side?
Yeah, I think we can give a preliminary, but I think yes. Well, I'll stop there. Okay. Beth, we have an anonymous question. Is there a possibility of an increase for benefits cost for employees?
Well, the benefit costs have already been set, as we're currently in open enrollment, and those are set by the state. And those were done, most likely prior to COVID, or at least a couple of months ago. So some of the plans, actually plan premiums went down. Some of them went up slightly, just depending on the type of plan that you have. So I'd encourage you to look at the enrollment materials that you have. But the increases would, if the plans that did increase, it would not have been driven by COVID, because those decisions would have already been made at the state level.
And a related question from YouTube, Brian Ogle asked, will there be an opportunity for employees to change dependent care withholdings after open enrollment, given the uncertainty of daycare in the next fiscal year?
You know, that's a great question. That is, those plans are federally governed. They are IRS regulated. So if modified guidance comes from the IRS, then certainly we will communicate that. I'm not aware right now of that being allowable, but you know, the mantra has been the answer could be different tomorrow because things have been changing very, very quickly. So certainly, if any changes to those types of plans occur, we will make sure to communicate that.
Thanks, Beth. There's another question from YouTube about PPE and disinfectant. I promise you, we are asking these questions. We are thinking about these things. We are exploring all the options. We know we have to get this stuff in place before any kind of wide open. You know, people are asking about plexiglass, about various kinds of protection. We are looking at all of that, and all of that will have to be part of the conversation that we have before we reopen with students in the fall. So I absolutely understand your concern. Continue to ask them. It's appropriate that you ask them. Bring them up to those of us who are leading these task force subgroups. You know, we will bring that information to you as soon as we have that. Nina, there's a question, anonymous question about when are FSEM instructors going to be looped in on contingency planning for the first year experience, including FSEMs in case we need to be online for some or all of the fall?
Very soon. I mean, in general, right now, faculty already know they should be planning and developing their courses for all these contingencies. So certainly the FSEMs, but my understanding is that April has a pretty comprehensive message coming out with a number of, with some important information and guidelines and a variety of other things. I think it's supposed to come out next week, but soon, very soon.
Great, thank you. Nicole has a question from YouTube. Does this, and I think this was in reference to your conversation with Steve Harris. Does that mean that there will not be university policies based on class sizes as to what should meet remote, et cetera?
No, right now we're not changing any class size policies, but again, I think we're going to have to be flexible, and I think we're going to have to see another important factor, which I'm surprised nobody has brought up, but keeps me awake at night, is what does it mean to offer classes on a residential campus under social distancing? Right. So we're going to, you know, Deborah and Tim and others are also looking at all of our spaces where our classes are put. And we have already started on the process of trying to figure out where we would put everybody under you know, some kind of social distancing. So I also really encourage all faculty to consider the curricular and the pedagogical implications of that as they plan their courses. But
okay, and then a follow-up: is it possible now to switch all of one's courses from face-to-face to online?
Yeah, that's. I would say I wouldn't plan that that's going to, I wouldn't assume that that's going to happen. And I think you need to talk to your department chair and others about what would be advisable. That's a real curricular question, but I think everybody needs to be prepared for that.
And the final question here, which is good because we're down to the last minute, is one that I don't think any of us can answer. Is there a project in the works to provide a digital tour of UMW for interested or incoming students? And if so, what is the timeline? I do know that admissions and university relations are working on continuing to improve the site so that it does recognize the reality that most students are visiting from afar, and they've made a number of adjustments. But again, I think this is one that I'm going to kick down the road 2 weeks for the for when Kimberly Buster Williams and her team is here to give a similar presentation. Thank you, everyone. Thanks to all to Beth, to Nina, to Juliette, to all of you for all of your questions. Please do continue to ask them. We will continue to answer them as much as we can. And please take care of yourselves, take care of your families, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Okay. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, y'all.